Are we live, Bertie? Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so good evening and welcome everyone to meeting at South Oxfordshire District Council and Vale of Whitehorse District Council's Joint Audit and Governance Committee. I'm Councillor Emily Smith and I'll be chairing this meeting. The meeting is being held in our office in Abbey House, Abingdon. Voting members are here in person as required, but officers and public speakers are able to join remotely, and we do have a few online. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing as well. So few housekeeping announcements. Evacuation procedure. If there is an emergency, we need to evacuate by the nearest building, which is in the corridor immediately to the right of this room, and the assembly point 9 outside. On arriving at this meeting, you should have read the emergency procedure register and fire register and signed that out on the table out there. For those of you joining remotely, when you're not speaking, could you ensure that your microphone is muted and camera is off? And could everyone remember to put their mobile phones on silent? So I will check mine as well, or turn off during the meeting. And laptop too as well on silent would be good. Both officers and members will be able to use electronic devices throughout the meeting for papers and notes and things. So if councillors wish to participate in the debate, please raise your hand and I'll call you in turn. And I don't think, unless there's any specific recommendations that come up during discussions, I don't think we've got any planned votes that need to be done council by council. But if a recommendation comes up that applies to, then we might need to take a vote, 2 votes, one for South and one for Vale. Councillor Skinner?
May I just ask, I understand if we've got a Teams meeting where there are 25 or 50 people online, it can be helpful to have people turn off their cameras, because then they turn it on when they're going to speak. It's easier to spot. But what is the reason for asking people not to turn their cameras on remotely?
Bandwidth, probably.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe bandwidth.
Well,
but yeah.
I mean, it just feels to me, as we were saying earlier, that us ordinary councillors don't get much chance to see officers if they don't come to the meetings. I mean, it's true. You have to crick your neck round to see there, but at least it sort of shows willing. Personally, I would find it more, I don't know, friendly, whatever you say, if in fact people had their cameras turned on. But that's just
yeah. Nick, were you just saying hello, or did you want to come in?
No, I was just saying hello, Chair, but it was just perfect timing, I suppose. I'm happy to have the cameras on or off as you direct, Chair. It's your meeting, you make the decisions. I can't believe anyone wants to see me, but we'll be paying attention. A camera on and off as you choose.
It grabs your attention.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you see people moving around, you just takes your attention.
I think it's probably a bit. I think we'll stick with cameras off unless you're on that item. But for now, but it's an interesting point to think about how that works.
Interject. I mean, I would say that David should be with his camera on, because he's sort of.
Yeah. So for the item. So perhaps we do it for the item when we're discussing it, that the officer or the member is.
That is what we do.
Yeah.
So, so when you speak to an item, then you, as the cabinet member or the councillor or the officer, are on screen.
I don't want to prolong the debate, but I would just say if the government is going to change the rules so that we can have remote meetings as working meetings, I believe we should think about that.
Yeah, it's a good thing to review, I think. For like all meetings, not just for this one, but a good thing to sort of just review and check and see how we're doing it and if it is the best way. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so before I'm just thinking, should I take your item under urgent business or should I do it now?
Do it now.
Yeah, I was gonna. So Simon's got a quick update for us before we start. So under Chair's announcement, I was just going to ask Simon to update us on the 2022-23 account.
Yeah. So. Thank you. You'll recall that at the meeting in September of this committee, when we considered the 22-23 accounts for both councils, it was agreed that the audit completion reports by EY will be circulated to you all to give you a chance to review and ask any questions prior to the conclusion of the audit process and the final accounts being published. I received those reports last week from the EY partner responsible, Caroline Mully, and I forwarded those on to members of the committee, so hopefully you have now got them. If you have any issues with those letters, please let myself or Caroline know by close of play on Thursday. If we don't hear from you, we will assume that you are content. I would draw your attention in particular to the wording required for the letters of representation. They are in Appendix A of the documents I sent on. You'll recall that the committee has authorised myself and the respective co-chair to sign and return final versions of those letters as part of the process of finalising the accounts. So I guess the first thing just to check is that you've all had those letters and have got them is the first thing.
Has everyone received the letters? Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, I received it. I was just commenting, having gone through it. They seem to have managed to get the smallest font that it is possible to get, which I found very hard to read. And I don't know if it was the style of font. You know, I think things like Arial are often easier on the eye, especially if they're small. I guess they're leaving anyway, but I just thought might be easier. I mean, from what I've seen spinning through it, there's no dramas in there, and no reason to get excited. But it was just hard work getting zooming in far enough to actually be able to see that.
Are there any other questions on those report or letters? As Simon said, if you have got any questions or comments, do send those in to Simon by Thursday, and then Poppy and I will review any comments and sign off as appropriate. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Right. So next item is apologies for absence. Becky, we've got apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Forder and Morgan.
Thank you very much. The next item is the minutes from last time. So it was the meeting held on the 15th of October. Does anyone have any queries or questions on those minutes, first of all? Yeah, Councillor Skinner.
Item 8. Sorry, no, from 87 in the minutes. I think we were going to get an update with the comparison of the number of complaints this year as against the previous year, which I think was normally in the reports, but for some reason was not in that one. That was just from memory when I looked through the.
And that isn't mentioned in the minutes.
It's not mentioned in the minutes.
Okay. So that was like a written. Was that?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember now. I think it was like they were going to circulate it.
Either.
No, I don't think so. Okay. So are you saying you want that added into the minutes, or
is there an action?
Well, I would like it to happen.
Yes, that's an action. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe we could make a note of it in these minutes, just to sort of check that that's in progress and that we get a written comparison of the complaint numbers over the 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think officers said that they had those numbers.
Yeah.
They're normally in the report, and they took them out because it made it longer or something.
Yeah, so it was just to share that by email, wasn't it, to the committee members? Well remembered.
We'll follow up on that action. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Are there any other comments or?
Well, item 8 is just Hilly Committee, which I found a little bit strange. I don't know if you got over it. Doesn't say which committee. Or at least it doesn't on my copy. Hey, well, it calls itself page 87, but it's the page after the page that calls itself page 87. I think it's actually page 9 according to the whatever it is that's displaying it to me.
No, it's just missing that one.
I see.
Yeah, it's just missing the top line's gone missing. It should be audit governance.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not important except that it's a strange kind of system failure sometimes.
After the patch days.
It's just got the draw. It's just got
Okay, so it's on the supplementary papers. Okay, yeah, found it. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Anything else with the minutes, or are we Otherwise, I shall propose that we sign those off as a true record of the meeting.
Well, I think I am going to ask
Mhm.
when we get to, the neat of it, the corporate risk review.
Are you still on the minutes from last time?
I think I'm struggling with that. I may not be because of the strange heading.
It is on the
Yeah.
agenda, so we can discuss it when we get to that item.
Yeah.
Fine,
It's on the agenda for today. So I just at the moment,
No, it's after the minutes. It's headed by that's why.
I see. Don't worry.
Sorry.
That's all right, no problem. So in that case, can I propose that we sign the minutes from last time from the 15th of October?
I'll
as a true
second it.
record? Okay, is everyone in favour of that? Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. I'll sign those papers at the end of the meeting. Okay, so the next item is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any committee member have a declaration to declare now? Obviously, if anything crops up during the meeting that you suddenly remember, just shout. Okay, there's no urgent business. Public participation, I don't believe we've got anybody registered.
No registered speakers.
So that means we're on to item 7, which is the review of the future Oxfordshire partnership. And this is the item that we have Councillor Betty Thomas and Councillor Dilly Wayne with us for, and also Suzanne Malcolm online as well. So Suzanne, were you going to introduce it, or are you going to start off?
Yeah, happy to do so. I also think Nick wants to come in and just give some guidance around what actually the committee are looking at this evening. But if I kick off and then hand over to Nick, and also the leaders if they want to make comment as well. So first of all, good evening, committee. The paper in front of you this evening is in relation to the proposed refresh of the future Oxfordshire partnership. And associated devolution plans alongside that. What I will say about the paper that's in front of you this evening is it's an interim paper. So basically it's a request for the leaders to endorse a discussion tomorrow at the future Oxfordshire partnership for some further work to be done to look at refreshing that partnership. So what you've not got in front of you, unfortunately, tonight is not a revised terms of reference of that group, but it's basically a suggestion that there's plans ahead to look at that terms of reference and to reshape that organisation in terms of what it does and the way it makes decisions, which will obviously be something that would be subject to further discussion with this committee in due course once we have that information. So very much an interim paper at this stage, and it's something that the leaders are going to be asked tomorrow evening, as I said, to endorse further work to be done on in terms of reshaping the partnership. By way of background, the partnership was obviously set up several years ago, primarily around the housing and growth deal for Oxfordshire, which is now coming towards an end. And the decision's been taken that this is a time to look at what that organisation does, how it does it, and how it works in terms of the areas it gets involved in going forward. That was all fine back in June when this went through Cabinet as something that we all wanted to look at. But since then, obviously, the government's made plans around devolution or announced plans around devolution. We're waiting the white paper imminently in terms of what that will look like. So alongside that, there obviously is an uncertainty about what devolution will look like across Oxfordshire and what kind of forums will be required to enable discussions and decisions around that as well. So just throwing that into the mix again is something that the committee need to be aware of, but again, no further details available at this stage to really get your teeth into. So I'm going to stop there. Very happy to take questions as we go forward, but I'll hand over to Nick in the first instance to just talk about what the committee can usefully feed into this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Suzanne. So yeah, I mean, I'm very conscious that you and your members will be sharply attending on the terms of reference of this committee, because you've got an item on it later on in this very meeting, and that will remind you, I'm sure, that the focus for this body is exactly what governance you expect to see in any of the bodies where you have any oversight or any commentary role. So the important thing I think I need to emphasise for members, Chair, with your permission, is this isn't about whether you think there is a need for a FOP, if you like. It's if a FOP is if we do continue with a FOP, and if there is a FOP, and you've just heard that that's a work in progress, I suppose. What type of FOP do you think there should be, or your members should be asking, from your local perspective as the lead members with a specialisation and a specific responsibility for governance across the authorities and its partner agencies? So how would you like any FOP, whatever it might look like, how will you want the decisions to be made at that FOP? And what checks and balances in governance terms do you think ought to be applied to that? Having debated that, and you'll have seen that the recommendation here is fundamentally a noting recommendation to note whatever you all debate. That can then be taken forwards by your leaders, Councillors Ruane and Bethia at the Vale, whose surname I just forgot, as you can tell. And sorry, Councillor. And that's your focus. It's very easy in these sort of meetings where there are several different bodies looking at it to drift into other areas. But that's the challenge for you, I would say, Chair, is making sure that we keep the debate within those very narrow two areas. Obviously, I'm here if there are any further questions around governance or the breadth of governance or things like that, then I'll do so. But the technical questions will be answered by Suzanne, and we're both here through the debate to assist as best we can. Is that right, Chair?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Nick. David and Bethia, did you want to say anything now, or
if I could give a bit of context, I guess, as to where we think we are as members of FOP. FOP used to have a really clear defined role in that it was overseeing the growth deal and it was working towards Oxplan 2050. Quite a while ago, and I believe you were in the room with me, Chair, when we decided not to go ahead with Oxplan 2050. But that still left the growth deal, and we had quite an infrastructure around looking at the various aspects of work around that, with lots of advisory groups. I chaired the environment one, but there was also one on infrastructure and one on housing. As the growth deal has come to an end, we as leaders gave a steer that while ever the current structure of councils exists, while there are two tiers of councils within Oxfordshire, then we need a forum where we can talk to each other. And personally, whilst we have private meetings of council leaders, it's good for us to have a formal meeting in public in terms of our transparency and giving people opportunities to present to us. But we wanted that forum to be light touch because it didn't have a formal agenda. That was the steer we gave that has led to this view as to what FOP should be and the governance structures around it. In the meantime, the government stepped in and has, through the normal government process of leaking to the Times, has suggested what the future might look like, which the heavy steer is that there won't be two-tier councils. But we don't know what that's going to be look like, depending on the response to the article, I guess. So we're in a bit of an interregnum at the moment where we're moving away from the formal growth deal and the policing of that and into something that we don't quite know what it would be. So we're in a holding position at the moment, and that's the context in which this paper exists.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, do you want to add anything?
No, I think David's covered it all.
Right, in that case, I will take comments, questions and things from the committee. So Councillor Rawling.
I'm just slightly going to disagree with Nick in as much as I think that the scope, we're responsible, in my understanding, for governance across our councils, and therefore all matters that relate to governance are within our purview. And obviously, as Suzanne's report makes clear at point 11, in 2019, both South and Vale did pass motions supporting the idea of having decision making more locally wherever possible, and envisage the possibility within, you know, perhaps a 300,000 population that there might be a unit of government across South and Vale with decisions kept as local as possible. And I think that's relevant, and I don't think that's actually in conflict with, even if the government starts to say, well, actually, we quite like unitaries because there can be lots of difficulties and boundary issues between first tier and second tier government, and there is merit in having unitary from that point of view. So I think that actually, given that their motions across our councils may shape some of the way in which we ought to be looking at this. I take the point that's mentioned in here about mayoral combined authorities, but I think they're intended to be much higher level roles, looking at national infrastructure and perhaps some headline planning numbers or something, but not the nitty gritty of the governance of the councils. When we come on to FOP itself, I think that it's entirely reasonable to consider what its scope should be, given that it was for the OGD, the Oxfordshire Growth Deal, and the Oxfordshire Growth Deal has come to an end, and therefore that motivation has finished. I certainly see that FOP has a role with cross-boundary issues, but it seems to me that its scope should be made clear in terms of it's not to get involved, as was the decision previously, in planning and plan making, housing and housing numbers and all that sort of stuff. I think it should have, based on those motions, a principle of subsidiarity, that it should only consider issues which go cross-boundary across the whole county, where matters can be solved bilaterally by 2 or 3 councils because something just crosses a border. I think they should be so resolved. And I think that for written into its terms of reference, it should support local government provision and decisions as close to localities as is viable and sustainable. So keep it local and keep the local in local government. I have concerns about the fact that the existing terms of reference, at least, provide for qualified majority voting, and that you could have 3 councils voting each way, and the chair making a casting vote and imposing on the other 3 a decision, which seems to me improper under the premise which I understood FOP was going forwards when it was last reviewed, that we should be moving more to a consensus basis written in to decision making. And I would find a 3-3 on the casting vote of a chair a pretty dodgy way of doing business. I do think we have to clarify what decisions FOP is supposed to make and what its scope is, as I've said, and then from there we have to understand whether scrutiny is appropriate or not. They're proposing the abolition of scrutiny within FOP, so how it's to be done needs to be properly clarified. And I believe it's the case that decisions, now that OGD is done, effectively have to be endorsed by the individual councils. But I think these are really important governance points that need to be properly examined, and I don't think they have yet come to that place.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what you were just talking about there are things that will need to go into the terms of reference of any, when that comes forward.
I'm just suggesting we might actually put a few steers that way.
Exactly, yeah, I think that's fine. But I think we can capture some ideas for things that we would like to see in the terms of reference during this meeting. I think that's a good thing to be doing.
Thank you.
That's a
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4
questions, comments, if you will indulge me, Chair. The first one is quite a basic one. I just want to ask the leaders, do you think FOP is fit for purpose and is it actually needed?
Good question. You mind me taking that, David? Oh, I'll take it and you can carry on. Fit for purpose. I struggle to believe that it is fit for purpose as it currently stands. And in the paper that I most recently saw setting out what is going into the future, I'm still not 100% convinced. But as we've said, it does feel a little bit like a repeat of last month. Apologies, you probably hear the same things I said before. Everything is very much determined by those terms of reference that we need to get right for the future. So that's the future Oxfordshire Partnership. I think that the scope is still undefined. It should be more clearly defined. It is too broad, in my opinion. And I think if we, particularly in the situation we find ourselves at the moment with the idea of devolution hanging over our heads, I think it should be a very slimmed down organisation, partnership, whatever you want to call it. And yes, so to get back to governance, I think in terms of scrutiny, we should have a much more defined and clear purpose for that as well.
Okay. Councillor Rowan?
I think that there is room for a forum where council leaders meet in public to discuss matters of common interest. I don't think as it's currently constituted, FOP is that, because that's why we're asking to reconstitute it. I think at the moment it's too cumbersome for that. But I think our officers across councils will always meet together to do things and to have discussions. But unless there's a forum where they can report that, then that is very much a behind closed doors thing. So I think there's room for a forum which is transparent and open and gives the councils a chance to work together, but we need to frame it properly.
Okay, so I think the answer you say from both of you is no. So my next question is, there's a section there, it says FOP reset. Can I ask who put those reset conditions and criteria in there and why? So who's it? Was it the officers? Was it the leaders, or was it the cabinet?
Which specific, sorry?
Well, you got a whole section saying this is the reset that you want it to be. Who chose those items? Who chose those criteria?
So it has been a continuing discussion. We've had various workshops and discussions through over the months. We had a workshop back in June, I think, and it was all the leaders, and we were discussing it in the first sort of very early sort of thoughts around devolution as well. Obviously, it was a broader discussion, and I think for me personally, as my personal point of view, some of those broader themes were kept in, and as I said before, I'm not very happy with those broad themes being kept in. If we're talking about subject matter, it's too general, and I think I can hear in my mind sort of some of those words that are put on that paper that were discussed at that. But obviously Suzanne has been in Suzanne in particular, I should say, has been sort of discussing this with officers as well. So it's been a collective effort, I would say.
So has there been councillor contribution in this?
Well, as I said, yes, we had the workshop. That's where it started, and yeah, it's my bugbear. That's AI is mentioned in there, and I definitely wouldn't ever include AI in that sort of scope of what we'd be talking about. But I can remember another member suggesting that, but they will remain nameless.
I'll just go to Councillor Ruane as well on this one.
Yeah, I think Beth here has set what the process is, which was that there was a discussion amongst council leaders as to what the future FOP might look like, and that was then taken away by officers to work up into this document. What hasn't happened to this document is it then come back to leaders, which is what's happening tomorrow, to apply a filter on that and say yes to this, no, not that, and that process hasn't happened yet.
And Suzanne, do you want to come in?
I was just going to add to that to say that, yeah, as officers, we've had many discussions across the various councils and with FOP officers around what should be on that list. It's fair to say that list was a lot bigger when it first started, and from South and Vale perspective, I've fought to reduce it and to try and focus it. So we have had some wins in terms of that list is significantly shorter than perhaps it was at the outset. There's still some things on there that we as officers don't necessarily think are priority to be focused through FOP, but we think there is still a route for FOP, particularly around devolution, and which is why devolution is now on that list, and it wasn't at the outset. So at least that is now on the list. But as David said, the chance tomorrow is for the leaders to shape that the way they see fit.
Can I just add?
Oh yes, sorry.
I was just going to say, sort of echoing those thoughts and considering them, is obviously we are discussing them again tomorrow, but we're doing it tomorrow only because we've held off. We've managed to schedule both the joint scrutiny meeting and JAG, so we could have the discussion here at our councils, so you could input and feedback as well, so we can then obviously deliver our council's message tomorrow.
Thank you.
I've got two more, but I'm happy for other people to come in, and then I can come afterwards.
Anyone else itching to speak? Councillor Draganti.
Yeah. So I just interested. We're coming to the end of what was the growth board, what was the FOP. I'm just, looking back, we always hear in the public sector how lessons have been learned, and I'm just wondering what the growth board and the FOP has, what we actually achieved on the ground at the end of its term now. If we have an end of term report of what, you've always had lots of meetings, lots of forums, all sorts of things, but what actually solid has come out of it? It's possible to ask that?
I'm just wondering if that's really the focus of today's discussion. But I know that
to use that to look forward,
yeah,
just what we might.
I think in terms of the because obviously we need to try and focus on the governance, and as we've said, the council's positions at the moment are that generally there is an agreement that it would make sense to have a meeting in public with all of the leaders there, to aid transparency, and then what we need to really focus down on is, okay, so what does that look like in terms of governance, decision making, scrutiny, those sorts of processes to make sure that it's working really well, and what sort of form that takes. So I'm kind of a bit nervous about going into discussions about whether unitaries are good or what the growth deals achieved, because I think our role tonight is to really home in on that decision making processes and the safeguards and sort of managing any risks associated with that. And I know it's been through joint scrutiny as well, so that I'm just thinking whether that's something that we should probably just pause for now and at least cover off all the sort of governance issues that people want to raise first.
Just on transparency, obviously this is an important committee, and that FOP is important because it obviously can shape, affects both councils. But just in terms of transparency, what are your views on how decisions or agenda items or debates and things are communicated? Because I think there's a lack of communication, or people knowing, or councillors knowing what's been discussed and what's been shared, or what made you make that decision. So what's the process and what do you think about the communication and the standard of it?
Well, I think it's been pretty poor.
Mhm.
So that is why in Vale, and I think in South as well, but I can't speak for David, that we insisted that we reinstate the FOP report to full council. I think that improves its openness of what we do and what's being done. It is very important to me that even in interim periods that we are suggesting that this might be, that continues, and that we obviously have more discussions like this at both JAG and joint scrutiny. I think it's very clear that our desire is also that the leaders set the agenda. It is sometimes very difficult to see where items we discuss come from, and because it's sort of this spreading mass of different groups and subgroups and everything, it can be unclear to us who are sitting up where a particular item has come from.
Before I come back, I'd like to hear what Councillor Wayne says.
You're going to come back.
Yeah, there's a difference between transparency and spoon feeding. In terms of what's on the agenda, the FOP meetings are on our council timetable, and the papers are published on our website. So, and we have 3 members of the FOP scrutiny committee who go through that agenda before the FOP meeting. Each council has 3 members. So I think there is transparency there. We've reintroduced or introduced a FOP report to council meetings so that we can review what has been done. But that was lacking before. So yeah, I think there's transparency about what's discussed and what has been discussed and what's been decided and what is on the agenda. Beth here is right to say there hasn't been a great deal of conspiracy.
Conspiracy. More
Freudian slip.
Sure.
There hasn't been a lot of transparency about where the ideas came from that came onto the agenda, and that has been a bugbear which both Beth and I have had, and that's why the steer from us in resetting FOP, because we both came in sort of after FOP was in its current state, and the steer that we were giving was that it should be the leaders of the councils that set the agenda. Remember, at FOP at the moment, the leaders of the councils only make up half of FOP. The other half are representatives from Oxley.
Thank you for that. I think we're in agreement that there needs to be better communication, and I certainly agree that the FOP report, the fact that it's been reintroduced, should continue. I am concerned about the lack of transparency in who's driving the agenda. So if you can make that clearer, I think that will help. Moving on to my next point, this report's about devolution. What is the process, or have you thought about what is the process of getting the views of councillors in that? Because this will shape the whole agenda of what this council stands for. So has that been thought about? Is there a process in place for that?
I'll just say I'm not sure that's like
No,
the main focus of this
but
report.
it's
So
also
bit-
about.
But yeah,
There is a procedure.
Yeah,
There is
I
a
was gonna,
procedure.
I was gonna have a very quick response
very
to
quick
that.
response, yeah.
It was basically, well, we can't really do anything at this point until we know what the white paper says. And the white paper could say anything to just say, get rid of the district councils right away, and then there's no process. So I think it's very easy to get sucked into a rabbit hole when it comes to talking about devolution. And I think we really need to just stop sort of imagining what might be, because it will suck our resources. Until we get that white paper. We can't really say anything. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Councillor Sinner.
It just seems to me that people are saying the reason for FOP has gone away. So FOP should go away, shouldn't it? I mean, I don't see why we're discussing perpetuating something which, I mean, I see here it's referred to as a statutory committee. Surprises me because I didn't realise we had that sort of power. But
yeah. So
and
yeah.
all these committees are discussing it. All of this is generating work, time, spending money.
So one of the points I think of this whole paper coming forward is there is that question that the original purpose of FOP isn't there anymore, the thrift deal. And so is it worth having any kind of FOP? And that was one of the questions in the review. But as Councillor Thomas, Councillor Whitney have both said, that there seems to be a consensus that there is a good argument for having a public meeting of the leaders together. And then, so that's the starting point that the councils have taken to this point. Not to say that we could take a different view, but that's the position that the councils have taken so far. I think this is what my understanding is. And therefore, the review is about, okay, so if that's going to happen, what does it look like and how do we make sure it's governed properly? But yeah.
But it seems to me we try, I mean, I don't have the history in this to know. We tried something to solve a particular issue and it sort of worked. If you're going to start off in a new direction, the last thing you really want is to be held back by a lot of history for something completely different. If you've got a new direction you want to do, you start a new direction.
Yeah.
So that would.
So you wouldn't want to see the new setup just kind of continuing for continuing's sake, but actually making sure that what's in there and the purpose of it is really clear and that there is a clear process, a reason for it existing going forward, and making sure that's articulated properly.
Yeah, I would be simpler. I would close down the old ones. You've got the minutes if you want to look at it. You know who the people are who designed something to solve the new problem.
Okay. Councillor Thomas, do you want to come in?
Well, very quickly. I mean, I would say perhaps when we first discussed the process of reviewing FOP, devolution wasn't there, it wasn't a prospect. That has been revived. So it would be useful to have a discussion forum to at least discuss that. Because it is going to shape our county, our area, whatever, our region. It's a sensible thing to have an open public forum for that. So it isn't, as we said, it's sort of like an interim position. And I think if we didn't have devolution on the table, this might look completely different again. But again, we can't really say anything until we get to the point where we know more about what might happen.
Just quickly, because if it was set up for the housing and growth plan, it would have been constituted in a particular way to reflect that. But we're now saying something completely different, the potential for devolution. So I suppose, would you have constituted the thing in the same way for that? I can't imagine that you would.
Well, I I would agree with you. And I think again, we need to refer to those terms of reference. That will be the next stage. And very important to get that right, to get with all of your input from both scrutiny and sort of councils across, because every council's had the opportunity for this paper to go through its own democratic process pathways. So tomorrow, that's when we start to discuss feelings of wider membership of the councils, and then we could clarify it through the terms of reference.
So just to check what you're saying, Thomas, so the way that it's constituted at the moment isn't necessarily how it would be constituted if it continues tomorrow.
Not tomorrow,
because it will come down to whether or not terms of reference, what that terms of reference says, and I think that we've got a role in sort of feeding into that. And I'd like at the end of this discussion, which I'm conscious that we'll probably have to speed up a little bit because we've got lots of other things on the agenda, although it is a topic I could talk for hours on. I have to keep reminding myself to stay focused. It would be good if we could perhaps have some recommendations. I mean, obviously, officers and the leaders are listening to our conversation, but it might be good just to sort of be clear about a few things that we want to make sure are fed back, or would ask the leaders if they would be willing to feed back in those discussions. Okay, so it's Councillor Khan.
I was just going to say, to summarise and to move on to the next item. It's great that you've given us the opportunity to discuss this, and I appreciate that. But it feels like we've just seen half the ingredients. I think what we need to do is for you to have that meeting tomorrow, and then come back.
Yes.
Because then we can have more of a discussion about the process and how it's governance. Because at the moment we're giving you some feedback and contribution, but there's still other things that needs to be discussed and debated. So if you can come back, that'd be great.
Well, definitely. I would like to check with officers to see what the process is, and perhaps you can do that. Just like but as far as I understand, the terms of reference are coming to full councils. So yeah, that should be.
Can I have a couple of things myself just to comment on or suggest or whatever. So I think there is, when I started to think about how to look at this paper in terms of this meeting, I was sort of thinking about risks, and in my head there's quite a lot of risks for our councils in being involved in these various partnerships if we don't get the governance right. And we can kind of dragged into things which distract from us delivering our own corporate plan. So having those processes really clear, and the decision making, and also the scrutiny that others have mentioned, I think is absolutely crucial, because I think one of the problems with the way that it is at the moment, it's very complicated, which makes communicating what it's doing very difficult actually, and a sort of clear understanding of what's what. And when it's so confusing, it's very difficult to see where the decisions are made. So if the group is to continue, I would like to see much more slimmed down, much more straightforward, and be very clear about where the decision is made and where the scrutiny happens, to make sure that anything that is suggested as part of that partnership is, that the sort of risk to our councils is sort of being monitored and checked, and making sure that there's input. I think in terms of I'm in two minds about whether we need to continue with it or not, to be honest. But I do think that the devolution question is a strong argument for something being public and somewhere to report to. But like I say, I think it would be good to keep it as tight and simple as possible. And I think that whatever happens with devolution, we've got to wait for the white paper to come out. And then my understanding is government have said that county elections are going ahead anyway. So if there was to be a change, it would take a little, it's going to, even if it was to go ahead, it would probably take a few years. And therefore having something in the interim, a forum like that does seem to make sense. But I don't think we could get into, it's difficult to plan ahead too much until we know how that might change in terms of devolution and what it might look like after devolution. So yeah, and then what was the other thing that somebody mentioned? I think it was Councillor Rollins, you mentioned earlier about it focusing on sort of cross-boundary issues and sort of where we're actually adding value, and it's not kind of muddying the waters with any decisions that we would be making for our council. So making sure that it's kind of really focused on things that really are adding value, but making sure that there isn't a detraction away from decision making at the district level, and that they're kind of keeping those decisions as close as possible. So I think, yeah, sorry, that was a bit of a babbly list of things from my head and things I think other people have said that would be good to think about when we're going forward with the terms of reference. And if there is an opportunity to bring the terms of reference back to this committee, I think that would be welcome. I don't know in terms of timeframes and processes, we can check that out, but that's another action after today to sort of check that process out and see if it fits in with work programme and if there's something we can do on that. Sorry, that was a bit long and babbly. I'll go to Councillor Rawlings.
If I may, I'd like to see some things go into the minutes coming out of this, and some key words. I would like us to be looking at scope, all of the points that have been discussed. I mean, there's been reference to the Oxfordshire strategic vision, which I think we all feel quite positive about, but that could reference there. I feel very strongly against what could be read into point 7 of Andrew's paper when he talks about maximising investment, which implies for me the old story of maximising investment, jobs and population growth. And it need not mean that, but it reads badly at the moment. I think that's got to be sorted out in scope. So scope, subsidiarity, that thing about keeping it as local as you can, power and decisions, clarifying from that scope how decisions get made and how they have to get ratified if they do need to get ratified, where scrutiny should sit for that, and the voting and how those powers, those individual powers within it, get carried forward. I mean, there's another way of expressing what Councillor Khan said about whether our aims in all of this are top down, and in my view, the origins of this were very much top down, or whether they're bottom up. And the answer often in these things is a bit of both. There has to be some leadership, but there has to be some steering from the ground as well. So I would like to see those things taken account of. And for me, the body itself should be the Oxfordshire Leaders Forum and not this top-down board type suggestion, which grates with me.
Okay, are there any other pearls of wisdom to pass on to Councillor Thomas and Councillor Ruane?
I was hoping for some more things, notes and thoughts.
I'm hoping.
Delivering them tomorrow.
I know, that is the challenge. That is the challenge. Hopefully, yeah, I can try and write some notes myself as well. But yeah, Councillor Ruane.
Yeah, I just want to end on a bit of a positive, because it's very easy to be negative about FOP. And when I'm on the train on my way to Oxford, or in previous incarnations when it's been in Banbury, I've had lots of time to think negative thoughts. But there are some things that we need to do together that are too big for us to do in our district. I'm thinking of the local area energy plan. There's an argument that says Oxfordshire is too small a unit to look at for an area energy plan, but it's something that we would never be able to do ourselves, even the two districts working together, but is absolutely essential because we have companies who are not moving into areas of Oxfordshire because there isn't an adequate energy supply. So it is something that needs to be done, as is the pathway to zero carbon Oxfordshire, something that it makes no sense for us to do on our own. We need to do it together. And the biodiversity recovery, nature recovery plan, there are lots of things that it makes sense for us to do them at scale, and we need a forum to do that. And we can do that behind closed doors, or we can do it in the open. And at the moment, this is the only open forum we have. And if we didn't have it, we'd have to invent something that might be a little bit like it, might not, might be a bit different, but we need something.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think hopefully you can watch back the meeting and write down all of the
because I wasn't sure that was going to be the summing up, so I wasn't like hanging on you everywhere, but I will. It's a very good point.
Unless, I mean,
I will, no. I will watch and type up a few notes.
At least you can.
Would it be helpful for me to read out the key points I just wrote down and then see if you want to
See if I could.
Okay, but this isn't how the minutes are going to read. I literally just wrote down
Yeah,
points.
that'd be really helpful. Thank
So
you.
I can email them to you. That'd be helpful.
Would you prefer them circulated?
If you could, yes, I mean,
I just checked that I've got.
unless
There's quite
David
a lot
has
to
taken
say.
it.
There
all
was
the notes.
quite a lot.
Yeah,
Sorry.
processes need to be very clear, how decisions are made and where scrutiny should sit. A clear understanding of the purpose should be streamlined and focused. That if devolution does go ahead, this may take years to implement, and having an open public forum for council leaders to be is important. Focusing on cross-boundary issues, ensuring that it is adding value and doesn't detract from district level decisions. I think scope with reference to the Oxfordshire strategic vision. Subsidiary,
It's more than that, but
keeping it as local as possible.
Yeah.
I was trying to keep it. Whether it's top down or bottom up.
power and decisions.
I wrote Oxfordshire Leaders Forum.
Yeah.
I would
And how
also
voting
like,
is done.
I'd also like communication in there.
I was going to say, yeah,
Okay.
did you catch communication?
Communication.
That was quite
Yeah.
a theme as well.
That would obviously not be the minutes, but I just.
No, of course,
No.
that's really helpful because of the
Thank you, yeah.
time frame that.
Yeah.
Can I just throw in one more, taking up, what has been done in the past is desired outcomes. So you've got a position to be able to go back and say, well, we were hoping to deliver this and this is what we've done.
Yeah.
So it's just,
I think that
Desired
was
outcomes.
mentioned, last
Yeah.
week.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Well done. Thought that would be a very difficult one to try and capture. So. Right, okay then. Well, I'm going to finish that item then, and yeah, just say thank you to Suzanne and Nick and Councillor Wren, Councillor Thomas for coming
We just
and
need to
talking
note the
to us.
report, don't we?
Yes, we do need to note the report, don't we? Sorry. Thank you for that reminder.
I think that could do better category.
Well, we've noted it and we've made some suggestions.
Yeah.
So I suppose, is everybody happy if I propose that we note the report and pass on those suggestions
Yeah.
that Lucy's just run through?
Yeah.
I'm
So-
happy to second.
Okay, everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
that's right.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. The formal close down of that item. But yeah, no, really appreciate you coming in and also giving us the opportunity to feed in before you have that discussion, even though it was, it hasn't given you much time to process, but hopefully there's something useful in there that will be helpful tomorrow at the meeting. And we'll also make a note of the action to look at the work programme in terms of whether it's possible to bring terms of reference back to this committee or not, or if there's another way that the committee can feed in whatever the appropriate time or process is for that. Okay, right. Thank you very much, everyone. I thought that was going to be a chunky one, and I was correct. So let's move on to corporate risk review. So Yvonne, would you like to kick us off?
Okay, hi everyone, Yvonne Cutler-Greaves here, Risk and Insurance. This is the half-yearly progress review of the corporate risk register for both South Oxfordshire and Vale of White Horse District Councils. This review follows on from the report that was given to yourselves in April this year. We noted it's a snapshot in time. Things are moving very rapidly in the council, very busy with lots of programmes and projects, and this is a reflection of a snapshot of where we are at the moment. And we recommend that the committee undertake this half-yearly progress review of the risk register as outlined as part of our risk management strategy back in 2017. That's all I need to add at the moment. If there's any questions, please, or challenges or check and challenges, please ask now or forever hold on.
And then, yeah, and also if you can just bear in mind under this item, so we've been sent the confidential papers, confidential appendix. So it's absolutely fine if we want to ask any questions about that appendix, but we'll have to move into confidential session. So if you would like to do that, kind of try and flag it. But if we start off with any questions or comments that are more kind of general and not breaching anything in the confidential paper, that would be helpful. Has anybody got any questions or comments?
There's a lot.
Councillor Skinner.
I've struggled with looking at the report that tells me there are 5 high priority actions from 2022-23, which haven't been
Including audits.
Is that the audit report you're looking at?
Oh, is it?
This is
Or the
just-
appendices?
Open. Sorry, it's the next thing on the.
Keen to get onto the next agenda item.
All right.
I'll start thinking about that then.
Yeah, we've got that planning then. Brilliant.
All I said, I was struggling. That's all.
We'll come back to that point.
Sorry.
Yes. No, that's all right. Don't worry. So yeah, so the corporate risk review, the papers are in the as a separate appendix. Struggle with that word.
That's slightly. I don't know if there's a question about this. The Osella replacing the Osella system, is it? Sorry, or replacing this. Did that? And you've got a sort of issue with the GIS and the land charges. Is this something we can talk about, or is this all?
No, can we talk about it here in the I'm going to leave it to confidential.
Without knowing the question, we probably don't.
We
know
don't
it, so-
probably know what's.
Oh well, just sort of update us if just how much of this is a concern.
Nick's popped up, so
There is.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I'm just concerned, Chair, that we make sure we keep well away from the specifics of the confidential element of the report. If members want to talk about that or feel that they can only really debate this in that way, then we're going to have to go into confidential part 2 session. And I'd suggest that you push this item to the back of the agenda so that we can proceed with the public part of the meeting first. But I don't know, it's a matter for you, Chair, but I'm just flagging the importance of that part 2 confidentiality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned.
No, that's fine.
That's fine. So so how do people feel about that? Should we pause this and then discuss it under confidential, or is there anything that people wanted to raise that's kind of more high level, non-confidential? Is it more about specific, the queries mostly about sort of specific line items?
I thought that somewhere in this we ought to be considering local government reorganisation and how we actually want to shape our councils. And that's not even referred to in the entire document, which I thought was extraordinary.
Okay.
I think when we look at things like Stella, we're talking about risks here, but there's also this huge transformation and productivity agenda, which is not even considered, it seemed, within that, which I thought was strange.
It's a separate risk in the risk register on transformation.
Okay, but I think the transformation could bring us into risk, couldn't it? But it's also a vital opportunity that's necessary for the council's sustainability.
The transformation is in the risk register. Is the devolution of that there yet? Or is it too soon?
I mean, it has been in. It's been taken out. It has been in our risk register about 2 years ago. It's been taken out. Obviously, it's still on the back burner, ready to be reintroduced. And I've actually been writing lots of notes here. Lots of risk descriptions. That will be.
So that will be picked up on.
Yes,
at an appropriate time.
It will indeed.
Yeah, you should be in the confidential pack. But I'm not. Controllers. Well, I can't answer that.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that we pause this item and move on to the next one for now, and then we come back to it under confidential when we can address any of the sort of specific points, if that's all right. Sorry.
That's fine. I shall sit back and reports.
Okay, all right then. So if everyone's happy with that, I'm going to move on to item 9, which is internal audit update report. So Victoria, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, start. Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So the report outlines the work the internal audit team has completed in quarter 2, which includes completion of 7 operational audits. Also during the quarter, I reviewed the audit plan with the head of finance and all other heads of service to ensure that the plan still meets the needs of the organisation, and also to identify any additional areas for internal audit review in this year and also in future years as well. With regards to open actions, I followed them up as I do every quarter. This quarter, we've seen a good number of actions implemented, including several of the past 2 high-risk actions. So we've reduced a number of those by quite a few now, which is great. We do still, however, have 8 high-risk past 2 actions that are open. I'm working closely with the health and safety team to monitor progress. They've got a long-term programme of work that has been established and well underway. So I'm getting assurance on those actions related to health and safety. With regards to the grounds and parks maintenance actions, I also regularly review those with the service team. They also have a service team action plan, which incorporates the internal audit findings. The one remaining high-risk item has also seen very good progress towards its completion. There's just one missing piece of information from a third party, and then this one can be closed off. With regards to mobile home parks, there are 2 open actions there. Again, I'm working with the head of service in this area to get the high-risk actions implemented by the end of December of this year. Any questions on the report of capital? That's it.
Thanks very much. So, Councillor Skinner, did you want to repeat your?
Yeah, I mean, I am puzzled because I am looking at the public. Yes, this is in the public. Yeah.
The audit report, yeah.
Okay. Well, then I'll just ask my question. I struggle to understand how we have 5 open actions, apparently priority 1, from 2022 to 23. And I question whether it's reasonable to expect internal audit to progress those things, or whether they shouldn't be escalated, at least to us, to understand why something which is, according to our own documentation, essentially a threat to our ability to carry out our statutory duties, but it languishes without attention, or at least without the solution. I don't think that's something that can be, it's internal audit's job to help the departments to discover these things and to report them. I don't think it should be internal audit's job to get them fixed. I think that's the kind of thing that we should be doing.
Comment on those really high, those is the priority one.
I mean, I can give the context as to why they're still outstanding, what we're currently doing, but I suppose it doesn't answer your question about the process.
No, and there's a sense in which I don't really want context, because my view, and maybe it's only my view, but I don't think so, is that we are here, you know, standing back to look at what is going on. I assume that, didn't mean to say that. In my experience of internal audit is that before one of these reports comes up, it has been agreed with the department whose report it is. So it's not a question of somebody being picked on or somebody not agreeing. It is, as far as we can tell, a fact that there are 5 things that have not been done that jolly well ought to have been done.
I think in some cases it's not. I think health and safety is a bit of a unique one, and there's a bit of a history there. It's moved from one service team to another, and they've identified and agreed on all the risks and all the actions. However, it's not a quick fix, so it's incorporated into their longer term plan, where they've got a list of essentially codes that they're writing one by one, and they're going through methodically. So that's kind of a bit of a unique one. And then there are the other scenarios. I think the mobile home parks falls into a category of potentially forgotten about category, and it's probably those situations that it'd be helpful to understand how the committee would like me to address those in the future. And whether you'd like a different sort of approach to that. I'm just looking at the one at the bottom underneath that.
Can you just remind us on the mobile parks, the key point there?
Yeah, so there was essentially one finding with two actions on it about having regular site visits and having a programme of site visits and having a checklist of those to sort of have a formal audit trail of when they're visiting the parks and what they're actually checking, which we felt was important and integral.
This is in terms of safety issues, or?
I think it covers, general,
Right.
well-being and also sort of health and safety checks, along with other maintenance and things, a variety of different checks. So I think that one's fallen into the category of forgotten about a bit. But the positive to take away from that one is I'm engaging with the head of service, and they're working with the team to get that one prioritised now. So it's I find the best way about going about it is getting that engagement from the heads of service. And that's the main kind of strategy I've been using. Yeah, thanks, Victoria.
Can I make an observation? I mean, I think the first thing to say is, in terms of bringing the information on sort of not implemented past due recommendations has been a bit of a work in progress. And I think, as Victoria alluded to at the start, I think her actions in the last few times of this report have got that number down from where it was. And I think it was quite a significant number. And I think the head service, myself included, are taking the exercise far more seriously, which is what you'd expect us to do off the back of this action. I think going forward, I think what we need to work out is the best way to bring forward to your attention those high risk recommendations that haven't been implemented and we're not seeing a clear path to implementation. I mean, to some extent, I'm having spoken to Victoria about the report and having her hear it again what she said to me previously, there is a positive direction of travel on those recommendations. I think, as you say, perhaps some of them are forgotten about, but they haven't been forgotten about because they've been picked up again. I think what Victoria should be probably bringing to your attention is where there is no activity. The email asks of the heads of service have gone unanswered. I think it's those that actually she could probably be bringing to you and explaining, that's what's going on, and potentially with a view to you calling that head of service in to have a discussion with them. So I think at the moment, I think that's probably, I probably want to take that away and have a chat with colleagues about whether that, I've just sort of thought that through as I've been speaking. That would probably feel an appropriate way to me, because then it's almost as if you've still got a limited audit report. So we bring, if you have a limited audit report, which all of these high recommendations would probably have been in, you'd have had the head of service in front of you, probably explaining what they're going to do about it. I think if we're basically coming to you and saying, well, they haven't done anything about it, I don't see why you shouldn't bring them back to ask the question. But as I said, I don't think at the moment we're in that situation with the ones we've got at this stage.
So you've actually, no, so with the exception of mobile home parks, the heads of service or service manager have actually been to this committee before on both occasions. And that's been my focus to focus on the high risk. And now I think I'm in quite a good place with the high risk ones, I feel assured. So my focus next quarter will be on the medium and the low, on the ones that Simon says are sort of showing inactivity. And I'd agree with what you said on that.
So I was gonna ask about, the high ones. And there's engagement there, and that's really positive. But then there might be medium ones that you're not getting so much engagement with. So if there's anything that we can do to
that's
encourage that.
That'll be my future focus now.
Okay.
I certainly agree that knowing that they may be coming to this committee to explain their lack of action will maybe speed things up. So I think that's be seen as a positive, but we do need to know if there isn't any activity and why. But I do think if the heads of services know that ultimately we as a committee may call them and bring them and ask them the questions, may help you unblock some of those inactivity.
And do you think it would be helpful at the moment, as you said, it's only the mobile home parks that we haven't had somebody come to the committee to discuss it? Do you think it's worth it at that point, or is it not the right time for that?
I think by the next committee, those ones will be closed.
Okay.
So I think that will be a non-issue next time. And then I also expect the grounds and parks to be closed as well by the January committee.
Okay.
So then it's just the update on health and safety, which is always a detailed update, and I work with the health and safety manager every month anyway, so I can probably give that update unless you would obviously like to speak to the officer.
So I suppose it's a question of figuring out how we flag up the ones that are either high or medium or low, that we're not getting the engagement and the progress moving forward. So that's what we need to.
potentially myself and Victoria could take that away and come
Yeah,
back with a proposal.
like how we flag that up.
How I
and-
present that to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Worley?
I was just going to ask where we are and how happy we feel on the IT security stuff that I know we talked about before, and there were issues with Capita and all of that, and how we controlled and secured all of the risks that exist from, you know.
Yeah, was that on risk review or audit? Would that have been?
We had some audit,
Scandal.
we had some audit actions which have all been closed now on the information security audit.
So,
All of the information security audit actions are closed now.
excellent, thank you. Yep, brilliant.
Okay.
I'm conscious that reading the report, I forget which report it was, we were told recently about not one of our reports, a report about one of the councils that's gone bust, essentially. And one of the reasons was failure of councillors to challenge the officers. I don't think that if there are priority one, and I remind you, priority one means the service has said they are potentially not fulfilling their statutory duties. I don't think there should be any question of if it's overdue, the head of service should come and explain why. I don't think it should be an if or maybe or anything that's negotiated anywhere. It should just happen. And I also think that those things should be reviewed at every meeting, not at a quarterly meeting, because it need only take 5 minutes. If there are no high priority issues, it's a non-event. If there are high priority issues, we should be asking why, and we shouldn't wait 3 months to do it.
A couple of observations. I mean, I think I've just checked with Victoria. High priority recommendation doesn't necessarily mean we're failing in a statutory duty. It could be a failure of process on a non-statutory activity. So it just wanted to be clear on that one. The health and safety one is a very good as an illustration that as a member of SMT, I have lost count of the amounts of health and safety updates that we've received in terms of policies and procedures, and there's an awful lot of work gone into them, and it's taken a long time to do them all. That clearly wasn't a quick fix. That is weeks and weeks of work of a person coming in, overhauling our systems and processes. So I think there are some high priority recommendations that can take 10 minutes to do. I think that one is probably 3 to 6 months work for someone with nothing else to do, and and I think that's the challenge. I think that there's no recommendations aren't all equal.
My reply to that, I think, would be that if these are flagged as overdue, then they're overdue. If you're saying there was a program of work to fix them that was going to take a year, then the due date would be in a year's time and they wouldn't be overdue.
Mike?
Yeah, it sounds, I wonder to what extent it's an issue of accountability, in that these are presumably part of sort of global goals of departments and broken down into objectives that got to be achieved there. If we've got these things that are red, then presumably there's a need to be able to say, well, it's in this position because this has happened or this hasn't happened that was supposed to happen. So-and-so is charged with doing it and with making sure it happens in the future. So, or by such and such a time. So we can see, okay, these are the red areas, but this is who's responsible and this is what they're doing about it. And getting it down to that sort of accountability to present to us. Does that make?
And I think I would say that's happening on health and safety because I know there's someone who is accountable and I know what actions he's doing. It's just not a quick fix.
Right.
And I think because it was inherited from a different team, he's inherited some due dates which were probably unrealistic as well. So I could change the dates, but I'm getting detailed updates every time, so I think there's more value in the updates themselves. I think one other common thing that I get, without wanting to generalise, is officers are really busy, and it's knowing how to action these actions along with all the other commitments and priorities that they've got. And maybe that's a wider question as to where does that fit into everyone's workload, because that's quite a common response that I do get. It's, well, everybody's urgent. How do I fit you in? Which is why I focused this time on the high risk, and my next time will be focusing on the medium risk and see what I get from that. But yeah, maybe there's a culture question there.
Yeah.
I work very closely with the health and safety team on a regular basis. I have regular meetings with them, and they're part of the risk reviews that we do. And they asked me to come and review codes with them for health and safety. They're very working really, really hard to get these codes up and running. And there's a lot of work still to do. Obviously, it has to go through a lot of governance, and they've got to review through a lot of different stages before they're accepted as different codes. And that does take a long time to do. So it is work in progress. And they have inherited some dates that probably weren't realistic at the time. Well, they probably were at the time, but things have moved on, and it's a different state of affairs now in terms of health and safety where they sit. And there's a lot of work that's still yet to be done, but they are working very hard to get all that process in place.
Yeah, Dr. Skinner.
I have to keep pushing this. We've got a meeting set up, so maybe we want to postpone that till the meeting. But the point is, we councillors need a system to see whether there are outstanding matters which are important and which are not being fixed the way that they were planned to be fixed. What we don't need is a red column that we then spend 10 minutes discussing that actually they're not really red, or it wasn't real matter. We need something that says, you look at this and that's something we should focus on because that's our job. So maybe it will, maybe it will
have a discussion about the presentation and just
see
how
it's not just
make
presentation.
No, but
it's
so
how
that
you think about
see
these things.
Yeah, but so that we can see it quickly. Like,
Yes,
this is the problem. Actually,
yes.
that's not the problem. This is the problem over here.
I mean, I think I've said I do have a real concern that we look at too many reports which don't really, in my view, come into audit or governance. So, they're a way of keeping us busy. We need to understand what we should be focusing.
We can bring that up under work program. Okay. Any other points on audit? Shall we move on to the next item? Okay, thank you. So the next one is
I just want to excuse myself, if that's okay.
Oh, yes,
I did want to stay for the risk one, but it's a bit late. You had to go into confidential session, didn't you?
I know, sorry about that. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's been an interesting discussion. Yes, thank you very much.
We've been very different. I propose that we note the audit.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah.
Is everyone happy to note the audit report?
No.
Thank you. Sorry. Oh dear. I said you'd need to remind me of that today, didn't I? And I was right. Okay, number 10, review of the JAG governance terms of reference. So, Becky, we're going to introduce this one.
Yes, I'm happy to introduce. So, following a training session for members of the committee, it was agreed by members that a review of the terms of reference be undertaken. This was deemed a good exercise to ensure the terms of reference were still suitable for the committee's needs. Terms of reference can be found in Appendix 1. Officers were reminded the items delegated to the committee in terms of reference, which were points 1 and 2, meet statutory requirements and were satisfied with the committee's current procedure rules. The report does highlight a possible area of review, which would be to introduce co-vice chairs positions, which would be appointed from the committee. Thank you. The recommendation in the report, the committee are asked to make any recommendations about updating the Joint Audit and Governance Committee's terms of reference to the Joint Constitution Review Task Group and each council for inclusion in the council's constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. So basically, we can't change the terms of reference here tonight. We don't decide on it, but we can make recommendations to you.
Oh.
No, that's where you come. The Constitution Review Group doesn't that. So yeah, so it's basically, is there anything we would like to recommend or change about this before it goes to Constitutional Review Group for discussion? Councillor Carr?
Just out of interest, can I ask when the next Constitution Committee meeting is? Because, you know, then it can determine how quickly, how urgent this piece of work is. You know, when is that next meeting? Because I'm part of that committee and I haven't sat on that meeting for a long time. Do we know?
Do you know?
I'll check if there's anyone scheduled coming up, but I believe that one will be inputted when it's needed. So from the recommendations,
I think the last one was probably about
a
couple of years ago.
Yes.
So there's probably a lot of terms of reference that needs to be reviewed. But going back to the topic.
So the meeting will be held once there's a sort of chunk of things to be discussed.
I'll double check. I'll circulate with the committee if there is one already scheduled. But I believe one will be added as a result.
Well, as a member, I'm not aware.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So did you have comments on it?
I've got on.
Okay, Mike, did you want to comment on this one?
Yes, I appreciate we can't change this, but I just struggle a bit with there's so many things that seem to be noted, reviewed, assessed, monitored and considered, compared with rather than things being recommending approval. And if you're recommending approval, you're doing something, you're showing that you've noted and reviewed and monitored and so on, or you're recommending changes, or you're agreeing with something, or you're approving something, or you're amending something. And so I struggle with all the noting and and so on, and because I think the discussions we've had and some of the things we've said we'll note, we've actually done more than note. We've made relevant points and so on as well. So
yeah, Nick, do you want to come in, Nick?
Yeah, no, the councillor makes a good point in logical English, if you like. Unfortunately, a lot of the functions of a committee of this kind are set actually, I think it's set out in paragraph 8 of the report, that the committee is required to, under discharge of functions arrangements, for example, to note particular things before it goes somewhere else. So it's frustrating that the language used is often weak. In the sort of language we'd use day to day, but the reality, and you've seen it today in the debate on FOP, is that actually you are technically noting your own report, but then you made some clear steers for the leaders to take away. So I understand where the members coming from on that one, but I'd say it's an unfortunate reaction to the wording of the legislation mostly, probably, but we can look at that for sure, but I wouldn't be too restricted by the use of that term anything, and you debate as you wish to, really, subject to your chair's discretion. So I hope that's helpful. I just wanted to make clear that whilst it uses the phrases like, you know, to note this, that and the other, usually that's just the formality of the local authorities arrangements for discharge of functions regulations.
I'm not a councillor, I'm an independent member, just for clarity, because we wouldn't have met before. But presumably that wording isn't statutory requirement, and you can adopt a wording that would have a bit more punch to it.
Thank you for clarity. Sorry, can I just respond, Chair?
Yeah. Go for it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So it's not statutory requirement, but what we try and do as lawyers is make sure that we're using consistent terminology, so that there isn't an argument later down the track that, oh, we were only meant to note and this time you gave a direction, and it's silly things like that which sound ridiculous from the outside, and they sound ridiculous as I'm saying them out loud, but they can be problematic, and they can be a ground for people to have the fig leaf of decency when they start appeals. So I'd encourage us to try and stick to the wording where we can, even though I feel a bit of a fraud when I say it to you, because you're absolutely right. In a sensible world where people didn't pick up technical points of that kind, it wouldn't be an issue, but sometimes it is. So unfortunately, I've learned over the years to just try and build in as much consistency as we can, and I apologise to the independent member for my own profession.
That's fine. But just to pick you up, you did say then, we could be accused of directing something, and I never used the word directing. I said recommending, for example, and that's got a much more of a meaning to it than we noted.
Ironically, you make the point for me there that whilst I was using one word and you were using a different word, we actually agree with each other on the same page, but we're not quite in agreement because we're using slightly different terminology, and that's the point I'm trying to make generally on the use of that phrase here. So I'm not accusing you of using any particular word. I'm just explaining the consistency is appropriate.
I'm just saying we can agree the wording, and we've got more meaningful wording in the document rather than something that's a bit weak.
I was going to say, could we just not find a get around this, and it could be noted with recommendations, noted with comments, noted with approval, noted with no comments. So I think that's probably the way I see it anyway, because whenever we give any comment, we actually say we note the report. However, there are some recommendations or there are some comments. So all we need to do is say noted with recommendations, etc. That's the way I would do it.
But are you saying that anything needs to change in the terms of reference, or
you can add that? But I think as chairs or as committee members, we have that power already. If you just want that clarification, you just add, we note the report, but we can also have these other elements added to it. Noted with recommendation, noted with no comments, noted with comments, for example. So I think it's already there. We just need to be clearer when we give our recommendations or comments when it's for note taking.
Yeah, Nick, did you want to come back?
Yeah, very briefly, Chair, because I don't want to waste everyone's time on it. No, absolutely, your Vice Chair is correct. Absolutely. At the end of the day, what your officers will try and do is give you the greatest freedom of speech and ability to debate that we possibly can, and to make the record match that whilst keeping within lawful grounds. Those sorts of workarounds, those kind of stronger expressions, if you like, that go in there, no one's gonna hesitate about that whatsoever. We just want you to feel free to debate in the way that your terms of reference want you to, and we'll just make sure it looks as lawful as we can possibly make it on the record. And absolutely, those sort of workarounds are wonderful things. We'll be very happy to support it.
All right. Okay, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I'm interested in the couple of different ways you can go at this, and you can just keep the score, or you can try and change the score. And I think there seems to be quite a lot that doesn't come here and doesn't get looked at here very much. We don't ever look at we don't seem to look at the management reports that would come out financially within the council. We seem to focus on the year-end reports, if you like, and that stuff. And I wonder if we shouldn't do more of that. That we should have more emphasis in the terms of reference about value for money, about transformation, and yes, in terms of governance, the organisation of councils and how what might be desirable. Because I think all of that properly sits within the audit and governance scope that we can have. And obviously the reports are saying there's lots of different practices elsewhere. There are some statutory requirements which we must do, and of course we will. But I'm less excited by the finer points of the differences with Worthing and Adur and South Cambridgeshire and this and that about co-chairs and so forth. I think there are some points of substance here that we could usefully have within the terms of reference and within the scope of what the committee looks at and seeks to achieve. One final point going on the way by, I noticed the reference to managing the local government pension scheme and such like, and obviously I just noting that there are major changes proposed for local government pension schemes, so that might affect how that comes together, I guess.
Can I work on a couple of those points? Certainly in terms of the budgetary control, which is what you're talking about. I mean, it's here is very common to other places I've worked. This committee is responsible for making sure that you're happy that when we publish the accounts, the right numbers are in it. The scrutiny committee is responsible for going, well, why is that overspent and why is that underspent? That distinction between the scrutiny role and the audit role is a familiar one that I've seen in lots of other places, and Nick's nodding, which is very helpful. And I'm not sure I'd want to blur that, because I think I have been in audit committees many years ago where that line has tried to be blurred, and it confuses matters, because it doesn't matter why. So you've got to be satisfied that if we're saying the service spent £1 million, that £1 million is accurate. If the budget was £500,000, that's not the debate to have. Your debate is about the process to get into that number is correct. The £1 million. Very often I tend to find the same people on both committees. So it's quite helpful. I had literally in some committees said, come back and ask that question tomorrow. So I would say that. I think what strikes me looking at the documents is I look at, so tonight we've brought the FOP report under C in terms of reference to consider corporate governance matters. And I also looked, for example, and I've lost it now, G is to ensure the effective scrutiny of the Treasury management strategy. Mm-hmm. If I think back to the last meeting, I think back to the FOP report, you've done more than just consider or review. You know, you've made comments and recommendations on both of those, which I think backs up Councillor Khan's comment. I think you are doing that. And probably just to clarify on H, which is the local government pension scheme, that is your role mainly on that is in response to local management of that scheme. So the overall changes, which will be about merging funds that are being talked about at the moment, I don't see those actually changing the mechanics of the rules of the scheme. They'll be about greater efficiency. So I don't think that will change the role here.
How the points about value for money, transformation, all that stuff, Simon, are you saying you don't see that as being relevant?
I think, well, first of all, don't forget the audit.
I appreciate that they had that. A particular audity way of looking at that, and value for money.
And I think transformation and value for money reviews also form or could potentially form part of work that Victoria does. Mm-hmm. So I think through this committee it would come potentially more through the audit plan.
One of the concerns I have with all the audit and the financial reporting and all that stuff is that so much happens so long after that. We're almost discussing medieval history or something, yeah. And it's fascinating and it's important, but is it going to change anything? And sometimes yes, but not often.
Thank you, Chair. One of the questions we've been asked in this report is, do we need a co-vice chairs? And although we're in this room and we're all one committee, we are technically two committees here. And one of the things I would suggest, and I would support this, is I would support having a co-vice chair, because I love coming to this meeting, but sometimes I can't come. And then, you know, I know there's a process of electing a chair to represent that council. But if we had that process already in place, then if one of us can't attend, then that person, as the co-vice chair, can take the responsibility to sign papers. So it speeds things up and doesn't create a backlog. Mm-hmm. So although we're one committee, we act as two separate committees, because so those 4 members, there should be a chair and a vice chair, so the process of this committee keeps going and doesn't delay things. So I would support that.
Can I just make an observation that if the EY letters that we circulated also make that recommendation? Yeah. So I think it's not. I suppose I'm just making the point that that's not just officers necessarily suggesting that that's actually come from me.
I think so.
Yeah, I'd agree that that's sort of practical. I know that it's happened recently one time and neither of us could make a meeting, and if there's a vice chair, vice co-chair, then it kind of makes it a bit more organised. We can make sure that they're fully briefed and that kind of thing before the meeting in good time. So that's another reason why I think it's a good idea. So I also support that. Is there anything else on these terms of reference you wanted to raise, Mike?
Forgive me if I'm like a dog with a bone here, but I'm just going to extract from Councillor Workbook, Local Government Finance, Governance and Audit. This committee is an important aspect of the governance framework at the council, as it sets the tone from the top, and will have the power to make recommendations to full council, the executive, etc., etc.
Yeah.
There is no power in noting, monitoring, and considering. There isn't recommending.
So,
Bit to dismiss.
so is there what am I saying? Is there merit in trying to put a line in there about recommendations, like making it explicit that the committee has the power to make recommendations? As we do in
What?
in practice, but
Are we
if it's
making a
not written down.
recommendation that we could make recommendations?
Maybe Nick can come in here, but my understanding is if we think something needs to be discussed at full council, we can put that forward. That's my understanding. And Nick, would you confirm or deny?
Yeah, no, I believe that's right. I've just got one of my textbooks out. Can you give me 1 minute just to quickly go back to the acting question, and I will be with you in a moment.
Of course, no problem. Councillor Skinner.
Sorry, I may have missed an important part of this debate, but if what we're saying is by adding a few words, we can remind everybody that this power exists. Speaking as somebody, who's essentially only been here for 2 years, it is easy, if you've been a councillor for a long time, to take quite a lot for granted. And it's helpful if things can be as explicit as possible. So I think if the independent member is arguing that it would be helpful to have a few more words in which would remind us occasionally, I would be in favour of that.
Okay. Nick, have you found the bit in your book that you needed to check?
The book of monitoring officers. We can take. I wouldn't want to give you a wording right now, but I can take away if you put in a recommendation that you want us to do that, then I'll come up with some form of words that will achieve what the independent member is suggesting, assuming that all of the majority of members there agree with that. I mean, I think it can kind of happen anyway, so I'll come up with something that meets the requirements of those 3 acts that are mentioned in paragraph 8. But yeah, I'm happy to come up with that.
Thanks, that's helpful. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, were there any other points on that before I kind of summarise and take a vote? So I think that the main things are, so there's the point that has just been discussed about Nick coming up with a form of words that will explicitly talk in the terms of reference about the power to make recommendations and who to would be useful. There's the question about the co-vice chairs, which is the main change, if you like.
We're supporting it.
So I'm going to propose that we support that, and then just to also sort of accept that the rest of the draft terms of reference and that we're happy with them to go forward to the Constitution Review Group, who will obviously pick up both those points again, won't they, and have a discussion.
Could I just say, Simon's point about the difference between the audit and
scrutiny.
The scrutiny is, I'm sure I'll forget it. And if there's any way that can be made explicit in the terms, something helpful like that, that would be really good.
And we can take that away and look as well.
Okay. So to also try and find a form of words that will make clear the difference between audit and scrutiny. It's a really helpful way of describing it.
That's good.
Because you do describe it like that to us every now and again. It's always useful. Probably more frequently than that, but yeah, having it written down might be helpful. And obviously the Constitution Review Group may come up with some other clarifications and ideas as well, I suppose. So, but yeah. So with those 3 points then, as everybody, can I propose that we note the report, those recommendations or suggestions that we put forward to you, and that the whole thing goes off to the, what's it called, Constitution Review Group. I'll propose that. You happy to
I'm happy to second that.
Brilliant. Is everyone happy with that?
Mhm.
All agreed?
Yep.
Brilliant. Okay. You're all right with the notes there?
Yes.
Thank you. You're slightly easier. That's
Yes. No, thank you.
okay. Right. Okay. So where are we up to?
Chair, while you're looking, just to note that I'll excuse myself from the meeting at this point, because I think that the rest of the items are ones that I can't help you with. With your permission.
Full insight, Nick, but that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, members. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Okay, right. Okay, so item 11 is the work programme. Becky, is there anything you wanted us to note?
Yeah, so that's me again. So the work programme starts on page 60 of the main agenda pack. So our next scheduled meeting is 27th of January 2025, and the following items are scheduled: Health and Safety, Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000 Annual Review, Internal Audit Update Q3, Treasury Management Mid-Year Monitoring Report 2024 to 25, and Treasury Management Strategy 2025 to 26. Following the JAG meeting on 15th of October, I'm aware the committee did request some additions to the work programme, so I'm working with officers to get those added. And obviously, you've mentioned about including the FOP terms of reference to return, so I'll have a look at that as well.
Brilliant, thank you for that.
Can I just add that at the moment we don't have a date for it, but we are expecting to need a meeting towards the back end of February 2025 to deal with the 2023-24 statement of accounts, because that's the backstop date, the end of February. At this stage, it's not clear what level of audit we will get. It may be that as this audit is obviously not yet finished, and the next audit is meant to take place in the backdrop of everything that's going on with local authority audit. It might be sort of same again, but we don't know yet.
Is there anything else that people wanted to raise on the work programme or suggest that we need to have on the work programme? Obviously, if anything comes up at any time, you can just drop your councillor Connor line, and we can raise it if you get an idea outside of the meeting, as well as something that you think should be coming to the committee. We can talk to officers about bringing it forward. It's not directly related to the work programme, but I wasn't really sure where to mention it. But it was just for information, really, for committee members, that Becky and I are discussing some standards training for joint audit and governance members, and we need to book that in quite soon. So we were just talking about potential dates. So basically, just to sort of give you a heads up that there'll be a bit of standards training that we'll be emailing you about in the next sort of few weeks to try and get that done. So not for the work programme, but just for your diary. Well, not diaries yet, but to be aware that we'll be contacting you about that.
So what's the training technically?
It's standards training. Are you able to say more about the content of the training, Becky?
So it's to help members with hearings, those sorts of things, essentially. Understanding
our role.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, as this committee.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's Southend Vale.
Okay, so it's just to flag that up, really. Okay, so the next thing then is exclusion of the public. So you need to consider whether to exclude members of the press public from the meeting. Following items of business under Section 12A, the Local Government Act 1972, and amended on the grounds that it is likely that there will be disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So can I propose that we now close down the public meeting and move into confidential session?
Can I propose that we note the work programme and we agree to go into confidential session I'll propose that.
I'll second that.
Thank
Is that okay? Can we do that in one hit? Is everyone happy to note and to also who was confidential? Okay, brilliant. That's great. Thank you very much. So I'll close the public part of the meeting. Thank you.
Brilliant. Just for Bertie's awareness, are you happy for us to resume the public session for the final decision? Would you like the decision to be in public? Is it's only confidential appendices? Is that how you'd like to take the decision, or?
Oh, that's a question. I'm
Well,
not sure.
when the minutes come out,
Yeah.
it'll just say.
We'll have
this-
Yeah, have a note in the
Yeah,
minutes.
there'll be a
The
note.
conclusion was. Yeah, that would be fine.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bertie. Can you close the live stream, please?